Hello, everybody out there in listener land. My name is Oliver G. This is the Earful Tower podcast, and today we're going to be demystifying the opera. And I don't mean the opera house, the Palais Garnier. I mean opera in general, with the help of superstar soprano Siobhan Stagg. 4 S's in a row right there. And she's brilliant. She's a fellow Australian. She's currently playing one of the leading roles at the Théâtre du Châtelet. And the piece is called Orlando. And I'll be going to see it on Wednesday. Now, this episode that you're about to hear, this is, like I said, demystifying the opera. So you needn't be an opera buff to appreciate it. Rather the opposite. I think this is for everybody. And we talk about Paris, we talk about opera, we even talk about rural Australia. And before we get into the episode, I just want to give a shout out to My Private Paris. They're tour guides, they're a tour company, they're award-winning, and they're excellent. And they're sponsoring this season of the show. So if you want to book a walking tour or any kind of tour in Paris or beyond, that should be your first port of call, myprivateparis.com, and you're sure to have a wonderful time. We'll hear more from Bertrand Dalmont, who is one of the co-founders of the company, at the end of this episode, where he's talking. I asked him, what's your favorite view in Paris? And he gave an unusual answer. So it's not even a view from up above. It's a view from the ground level, where buildings line up in a lovely way. So keep an ear out from him. My Private Paris is the name of the company. But first, before we even talk to Siobhan, you're going to hear her singing. What a treat for the Earful Tower podcast. Here comes Siobhan singing, followed by Siobhan talking, and then in the end, you'll hear Bertrand and me talking about views of Paris. Let's get into it. You're listening to the Earful Tower. Here we go. Siobhan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks, Ollie. How are you?
Well, you jumped straight into the Ollie. Talking about names.
Oliver.
That's very familiar.
I apologise if I jumped the gun.
That's very Australian. You're from Victoria?
Yeah, I grew up in Mildura.
Right, okay.
In country Victoria, which when Europeans ask where that is, I just say in the middle of nowhere.
Right. Where is it exactly?
Well, it is in Victoria, but it's 6 hours drive from Melbourne, so it gives you an idea of the vastness of Australia.
Right in the middle of Victoria, basically?
No, it's in the top left-hand corner, the northwest corner.
Oh, wow.
10 minutes from New South Wales border and half an hour from the South Australian border.
Wow. I think a lot of people have no idea how big Australia is. It's frightening.
Yeah, it's an enormous country.
That really is the middle of nowhere. And it's quite fascinating that you went from there to this week singing in as central as you can get in Paris at such a lovely, beautiful theatre. How did you find out you could sing?
That is always such a tough question to answer. I was always singing as a child in Mildura, though I certainly wasn't singing the repertoire that I now sing as an opera singer.
Right.
So yeah, this week singing an opera by Handel, Orlando, at the Théâtre du Châtelet. I mean, that expression that all the dots line up in hindsight, it's hard to say the jump. I think it's because eventually, so I grew up singing musical theatre and jazz and pop in Mildura, just for fun, but because it was an isolated place, I was asked to sing at a lot of events, so I guess I had a lot of performance experience.
From young?
Albeit quite informally.
But how many kids were in your primary school class? It's like a full school, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, Mildura is not a small place, but it's an isolated place.
Yeah.
So I think there were around 25,000 people in Mildura when I was growing up.
Okay.
So it's not tiny.
So it's not like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like everyone knows everyone's name kind of thing.
No, but it's small enough and it's 6 hours drive from a capital city. So,
yeah.
You know. Opera came much later when I moved to Melbourne to go to university, and I was singing in the college choir and started to get asked to come forward and sing little solos at little concerts. So it just sort of grew little by little.
In English?
As in the language that I sang in. By the time I was at uni, in church choirs, they often sing in Latin.
Wow.
A bit in German. But these days I sing a lot in French, and this week the piece is in Italian, Orlando.
Right.
So, yeah, working with languages is a huge part of my life.
Are you naturally good at languages? Do you find you have a natural...
I I always loved them for sure.
Yeah.
I did Italian and Indonesian at school, which is not
Indonesian.
So
Although I guess for Australia it makes sense to learn Indonesian in that it's next door, kind of. You know, like it doesn't make sense for someone in Europe to learn Indonesian. But I mean,
not as handy for opera.
I was going to say,
Although they do say it's the easiest language to learn, Indonesian.
Really?
Because they don't conjugate verbs, basically. So if you just know a verb in its infinitive and you just have to say who does it, I, me, you, they, the verb in its infinitive always, and then the rest of the sentence. So
I remember when I was in Indonesia once, I don't know if this is true, but I remember meeting someone who said that people are named according to the number they are in the family. So if you're the first kid, especially for men, I think, you got a certain name.
Called Satu, I think that was one,
if I remember
correctly.
Yeah, there you go.
Satu, dua, tiga, it's coming back.
There you go. Terima kasih. Wow, that's fascinating. Okay. But singing, so you sing. And when you sing in these, you sing in French as well, right?
Mm-hmm, quite often.
But that doesn't mean that you can speak French necessarily. Not you, but a singer.
Not necessarily, but languages... Someone once told me that learning languages is kind of like having a bank account. Like you can never have too much money in your bank account. You can never have too many language skills.
Right.
You just got to start putting money in that account or start learning the skills. So definitely the better you are at a language, the more convincing your portrayal will be of that character, for sure.
Wow.
Even though you can memorize things and...
So do you speak German, Italian and French?
Yeah. Italian is my weakest now, ironically, even though I did it all through school, because I've just spent the least time singing in Italy, although my next thing is in Rome, so I'll try and get...
That's the same show in Rome, isn't it?
And it's a completely different show, yeah, different one. But I've learnt French because I sing quite often now in France, not just in Paris, but in other cities too.
But you know, like there's the percentage of Australians who speak 4 languages, it must be 0.0001, right? And that's just, maybe you speak more. Indonesian as well, goodness me.
Well, I don't really speak Indonesian nor Latin.
But have you noticed that with Australians? Like when I grew up, there weren't other languages flying around like they are. Now I live in Europe, I see my kids they've got 3 languages thrown at them.
I often think, imagine growing up trilingual like your kids. Like, we just didn't have exposure to that in Australia for sure.
I don't even think I knew about other languages until I was like 7 or something like that.
It's true. Well, it's a massive island, and I think a lot of Australians never leave the island.
Sure.
A lot of people don't even have passports.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's I envy Europeans who grow up with the other countries.
Imagine. I also love languages, Siobhan. Now, speaking of Siobhan, I want to backtrack. Irish name.
Yeah.
Siobhan. Siobhan.
Siobhan or Siobhan. Yeah, depending. I'm impressed, though, that you both sound very convincing. I hear every day many, many variations on the theme.
People, but the same with in here, people call me Olivier. I get an extra I. They chuck it in. Doesn't matter.
Frenchify it.
Even on the most formal documents. And I'm like, on formal documents, I have to say something. But otherwise, I'm like, I'll be Olivier. I'll be you, Olivier, if you want me to.
You're joining a good club. I mean, there's some impressive Oliviers in the history books.
But now let's take it to Paris. So this, let's talk specifically about the show. I think people will be excited to hear what happens at behind the scenes, even on stage at an opera house in Paris. But this one specifically, you're at the Théâtre, it's du Châtelet? Du Châtelet? Yeah.
Du Châtelet, which I learned today because I did my research, that it's called the Châtelet because it's built on an old castle site. There was a castle there originally, or a fortress or something. That's where the name comes from.
Sure.
And the theatre used to be called something else, Théâtre Impérial or something.
Okay.
But what happens in an opera house, it depends which side you're looking from. But you mean from the performers?
I want to hear from your side. No, I've been to the Palais Garnier before, the main opera house, and I've seen something many, many years ago. But I don't regularly go and see opera in Paris. I'm really excited to go see your show on Wednesday. But I don't know what I'm in for. First, let's start with this. What's the difference between French people's reaction to opera or what esteem they hold it in compared to the other countries that you perform in?
Oh, well, one thing that is unique to French audiences is the synchronized clap. If they really, really like something. So in the English-speaking world, you might get a standing ovation.
Yeah.
But in the French-speaking world, it also happens in Geneva, so French-speaking Switzerland and Lausanne, you get that the whole audience, 2,000 people or however many, start clapping in sync.
Yeah. But I think I've seen this before.
Yeah.
It starts off as a smattering sort of thing, right?
Yeah, it starts out like normal applause. And then after a few minutes, they somehow, I don't know how they communicate with each other just by ESP, but they start to clap in sync.
It's like those, those, I don't know, like the balls that swing on one of those things that are meant to calm you down, pendulum, and then suddenly they all start spinning the same way.
Yeah.
They just reach that clap. So that's when people like it. So it kind of sounds, I've heard people talk about it before and they say it sounds almost sarcastic or something, as if like a slow clap, but it's the opposite,
No. It's a really buoyant feeling when that happens. It doesn't happen every time.
Right.
It's only when something is really special. But of course, you're so spoilt here in Paris. You have so many amazing theatres. I've seen that, you have featured the Garnier before on the podcast. And also I saw that you went to Versailles. I don't know if you went, but they have also an exquisite little opera house there.
I've seen it, but not when something's being performed. Yeah.
So I sang there earlier this year. It's amazing. You also have the Philharmonie de Paris, which is one of the most beautiful acoustics of a concert hall.
In the 19th,
in the world.
Yeah.
Really?
Like it was built specifically to have the most... Plus, it's quite beautiful in a very modern way.
It's stunning. The architecture is stunning, very modern from the outside, and then inside the acoustics are just amazing. You also have, the Châtelet, where I'm performing this week, and also slightly less known perhaps to visitors is the Opéra Comique, which is only a stone's throw from the Garnier, and just as beautiful on the inside, but it doesn't have this kind of palatial exterior, the facade. So I think people probably often walk past it without ever noticing it. But if you're looking for a night out and you're visiting Paris, I think going to the theatre is such a good way to do it. It's a way to see how the locals live as well, because you don't have these huge lines outside as you do if you go into one of the major tourist visit locations.
Sure.
And you get to see art, performed by live musicians, often who've come from all around the world. And you get to sit side by side. There's such a sense of community. That's what I love about what I do.
And do you find that Parisians, is it more popular shows in Paris draw bigger audiences than in Berlin, for example, or do you find it pretty much the same everywhere?
Berlin also has a really strong cultural scene. That's why I've chosen it as my home.
Yeah.
I've lived there for nearly 11 years. And I used to be a principal soloist in one of the opera companies there. So in comparison with...
What does that mean?
To be a principal soloist in a company is basically to be on salary in a house.
So no matter what show they do, you're going to be the leading lady, kind of?
Well, you mix it up over the year. They try to share it around. So I did it for... straight after my studies in Australia, I did it in Berlin. First, I was a young artist. So it's kind of like an apprenticeship for 2 years. So you sing a lot of small roles and some medium roles. And then when you've proven yourself, some bigger roles. Sometimes 12 different shows a year.
Wow.
So that can be a great way to get your foot in to the scene and get some experience. And these kind of jobs exist basically these days only in Europe, I think. And certainly not in the English-speaking world, unless you're in the chorus.
Well, what's it like in Australia? And I don't know if you know about the States so much, but I know a lot of listeners are in Australia and the States. Do they have a kind of opera world over there?
Yeah, for sure. But it's a little bit more sporadic. We have obviously the Sydney Opera House. You have the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And I'm lucky enough to perform in both of these countries each year as well. But the quality is definitely there. It's just further away. It doesn't, like, also the physical proximity that here in Paris you have those 5 major top level venues all within a couple of kilometres of each other. Whereas in Australia and America you might have one in each city.
Right.
So the cultural ecosystem is a bit more spread out somehow.
But also, like, Paris is such a hub for all art. Like, it's overwhelming almost. So it kind of, like, there's all that adding to it as well,
Yeah. I think that's the thing, this idea of overwhelm. Sometimes, particularly with opera, which is something that people hear about, but if they've never been to one, they don't quite know, or is it for me? Where to start? If you don't know any of the names of the pieces, it can be a bit...
Well, let's how about we talk to me as a guy coming to an opera on Wednesday? I don't know much about this particular show that I'm going to see. How would you warm me up for it? Like, you're do we say leading lady? Is that...
Yeah. Where there are 5 main singers in this, but yeah, I'm the main love interest so the piece is called Orlando, that's the main character, and he's in love with Angelica, and I play
You're
Angelica,
right?
But Angelica is in love with someone else. It's, complicated love. I was going to say triangle, but there are 4 lovers, so it's
quadrangle. Yeah, I love quadrangle. But like I'm in such a unique. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm talking to one of the leading ladies of an opera I'm going to see on Wednesday night. How would you most like me to prepare for this? What do you want me to do to make the most out of the experience? Come in blind, listen to it on Spotify as much as I can before, read about it. What would you say?
I think there's no special preparation required. Musically, it's Baroque music by Handel, so it's going to feel quite easy listening. You would have heard a lot of Handel even if you're not aware of it, just in movies and TV shows and things throughout the course of your life. It can't hurt to read the synopsis sometimes, like a paragraph summary for an opera, mainly because they're performed in foreign languages, although there are surtitles, so you'll be fine. That's like subtitles but above instead of like in TV when it's below. Subtitle and surtitle if it's above the stage. And here the surtitles are in French and in English.
Yep, awesome.
So you're gonna be covered.
Yep.
And also, I mean, there are people who do a lot of research, but you can also just come and let it wash over you and see where the images take you. It's also it should be very visually engaging. Mm-hmm. This particular production is set in a museum, and it's about a group of school kids who've come on an excursion to the museum, and then at the end of the excursion, 4 of the students get left behind, and then the museum closes with the 4 kids inside, and then at night, the statues in the museum come to life, and that's us, the singers,
wow.
the lead roles. And then, the plot unfolds. But because of the nature of the set design, a friend joked this week that it's kind of like visiting a Parisian museum and the opera, a concert in one. You get 2 for the price of one.
Double whammy. Yeah. So when you say that idea, the museum idea, is that totally new? So I saw, actually, as we're talking, I remember I went to the Bastille Opera House, which we didn't talk about that, did we? Have you been there?
That's the biggest one here in Paris.
That's the one that's built for opera, or what do you mean? The biggest? We're talking about the same one.
Biggest capacity, yeah. So the National Opera Company of Paris, Opéra National de Paris, has 2 houses. So they do the Bastille and the Garnier.
Right.
Different programming. So they do the major pieces with huge symphony orchestras in the Bastille because the capacity of the space there, and the Garnier is reserved for more Baroque pieces or Mozart, things with a smaller orchestra.
I see.
Because orchestras sometimes have like 100, sometimes more than 100 musicians. So you need a big hit logistically. You can't play huge pieces in the Garnier.
Wow. How many people are in the orchestra at the one that you're performing now?
Well, because this is a Baroque piece, historically they had smaller orchestras. I haven't counted, but it's probably 30 musicians more or less.
Wow. And you, like, I didn't realize that this whole production from you coming to Paris to the day that you leave is going to be like 6 weeks, is that right? And that's, what is it, like a month of preparations? Yeah,
4 or 5 weeks of rehearsals and then just over a week of shows.
It's over so quickly.
Yeah, that's really standard these days. Of course, the thing that people might like to understand is that the preparation takes 2 or 3 years from a conceptual point of view with the director and the people who've built the sets. It's just that the final rehearsals with us, with the actors and the singers, is condensed into this five-week period. But the planning, like my agent's booking me 2 or 3 years in advance, and then the opera houses are planning a couple more in advance ahead of that.
But then, like, this whole concept with it, so this 2 or 3 years coming up with the museum idea and building everything for that, and then once it's finished, do they go, we're going to take this to other countries, or that's done?
Ideally, especially in this day and age when we're all very concerned about sustainability and the environment, we try to do co-productions. So this Orlando production will be seen in at least 3 or 4 other cities in the next couple of years. But you won't be doing it personally, right? I am not. I think I didn't have availability, but they try to get the same artists when they can. And
wow.
Yeah, sometimes you do revisit and sometimes not. It just depends on the piece.
And the whole museum idea is specific, even though this one has been around for hundreds of years, that's specifically invented for this one that you're in.
Yeah. I mean, it's a concept that's probably been seen in other productions, but it's a unique, this particular design is unique to this production. It's a young Parisian director called Jeanne Desaubou. She's only about 32 years old, and it's quite a big break for her. So it's also exciting to be part of
super cool
early days in someone's directing career.
I saw the one I saw at Opera Bastille was La Bohème set in space.
Oh wow!
Right? Isn't that crazy?
That was a really modern.
Yeah. So like I said, this is all everything is new to me.
How'd you find it? Honestly, did it grab you?
Yeah, because I in this instance, I didn't know what I was getting into at all, and I'd heard of La Boheme before, but I didn't know anything. So I read the story, I liked the story, and then I liked the space thing because it was pretty wild. And I remember going in having no idea what to expect, and I liked it at the end. And I had a friend that went who didn't care for it at all, but I was like, there's something. Plus the story, I got a lot out of it, and I was like, I wish. You know what I felt at the end is I wish I could drop references to like classic opera in my daily life that people would know and wink back at me, but I forgot them all, unfortunately. But it was a very beautiful show.
Well, La Boheme is, people might know the musical Rent that played, it's probably still playing on Broadway, and they're a similar story. I mean, often the stories are so tried and true that people try to take modern takes on it, like the one in space. But yeah, I'm interested that it grabbed you. Your friend didn't like. Was your friend who didn't like it? Were they a bit more of a connoisseur, or were they
I
also
think so,
kind of?
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah. Is that?
No, it just doesn't. Sometimes when people fall in love with a piece in a classic setting, sometimes they.
Sure, I get that too. But it's like when your favorite. It's like when Paul Simon sings his songs and he does it differently, and you're like, don't do it differently. That's not what I'm here for.
Or you hear a cover version of your favorite pop song, you're like, that's not how it goes.
Exactly. About we started talking about behind the scenes of the theatre. Can we get back into that? I got a story of that theatre as well.
Tell me.
Is for the Olympic Games, I was on the balcony. Have you been out in that little room? There's a beautiful little side room.
Well, I'll ask them next time I'm there for someone to show me.
You know what I'm talking about?
I don't think I've been there yet. Yeah.
I don't even know if I've talked about this on the podcast, but the mayor of Central Paris was on this show, and then he just texted me at the end. He's like, "Do you have tickets to the opening ceremony? I've got a room at the opera house or the theatre." And I just ended up there on the balcony watching the
ceremony
boats.
of the Olympics.
Yeah, I was on the balcony with him watching the boats go by.
Yeah.
But the theatre is astonishing. I went in, it was just me in there. I just snuck in.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't, but I just went through the door.
Often opera houses have little secret terraces that are, just get used for special occasions. It's quite common.
But the theatre, the actual room is brilliant. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Even when I'm traveling just for myself and not performing, I love to go to theatres to see shows also for that reason. Like, you're pretty much guaranteed to see some beautiful architecture.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like the performance.
Definitely. And it's like museums in Paris. There are some museums where the stuff inside isn't maybe exactly what you're looking for, but the buildings are often just incredible.
Yeah.
But what about behind the scenes? Behind the scenes at a Paris opera, is it equally beautiful, or is it sort of, once you get behind those curtains, there's nothing going on?
Often the backstage part where we hang out is not as beautiful as the foyer and the auditorium, because of course that's where the spectacle takes place. But I have to say, in the Châtelet, we have really nice dressing rooms overlooking the river, which must be the Seine at that point in town. And I always arrive at stage door, which in every city around the world is one of the biggest challenges is finding the stage door on your first day.
Right.
I inevitably do 2 laps of the building before I find the stage door on the first day. My fate, always to be lost.
So what is it, like is it just a like sort of nondescript little side entry so that you don't go in with everybody else?
So that it's not obvious to all the fans at the end who then want to come and swamp to get autographs. Although people often do figure it out, and it's lovely to meet people who do wait at stage door. But yeah, it's pretty nondescript looking entrance.
Can you tell me what side it's on? Is it on the river side?
It's not a secret, but at the Châtelet, it's on directly the back side of the building from the main.
I think that's where entrance. I went in when I went to that. Yeah, it
would be. There's a little security desk, and you get a little security card when you're doing the show, and scan my way in. I usually get there a few hours before each show to warm up my voice and do some stretches and just get ready, revise the staging. Then 2 hours before is my makeup and hair call. And because the aesthetic of this production, because we're the statues who come to life, it's very historically beautiful, beautifully designed. So I have a wig, kind of like Marie Antoinette style, like I
saw on Instagram, yeah,
blue-grey wig, which my makeup artist last night told me takes her 3 hours to redo every time, because at the end of the opera they have to take the hairdo out.
No way.
And because the final scene, my hair is loose, and it takes her 3 hours every time to redo it. I think she slightly cries every time she has to undo it.
Imagine.
And so I have an hour in hair and makeup, getting the look of the character. Then I go back to my room and there's a dresser, because in this production I'm wearing a corset, like a real historical corset, and what they call in French a panier. I want to say a basket. I'm sure that's not what we call it in English, but it's one of those things that gives the structure underneath a huge Baroque gown.
Yep.
So my gown is probably a metre or just over a metre in width, which means I have to do this hilarious sideways crab walk to go through the doorways to get on stage. But it takes my dresser probably a good 20 minutes to dress me.
What are you doing? I always wondered when people get their hair and makeup and dressing done for ages. Are you just like on your phone, or are you like warming up your voice, or are you reading a book or asleep? Or
It's different every time. Sometimes I'm looking at my score, which is the notes of the role, revising the text. Because the lines have to be delivered, like we're actors as well as singers, you have to deliver the lines as if it's the first time we've ever said them. Sometimes you're responding to messages from your agent or your guests, or sometimes you're chatting to your colleagues. Here, the makeup room is actually a communal room, so the 5 of us are all there together. So sometimes a bit of chat. But actually, to be honest, it's usually pretty quiet because people are quite focused and getting ready for because we've got 3 hours ahead of us of performing, and it's quite high intensity.
What happens when you does it ever happen that you forget your line a little bit?
It's probably more normal than you would think to have little slips.
Yeah.
Like even last night, last night was the premiere, and I think in one point I said a word again, like, tu dois poter partir. I think I went, tu dois partire. Like I just had to correct myself,
right.
But pretty sure only the conductor.
I was going to say, what percentage is it? You'd have to either speak Italian or be a huge lyric fan of the thing to notice, or?
Well, the other character that I was singing to was Italian, and he definitely noticed.
Yeah.
So we just tried to keep a straight face and keep going. The conductor would have noticed, but I think hopefully we didn't break character. So I think.
Wow. And do you do costume changes as well?
Yeah, in this production, it's layers. So the costumes are designed by a guy called Alex Constantino, who's a professor of historical costumes at the university in Lyon. And so you'll see they're slightly modern, but the shapes are historical, and even the colours are all the natural dye colours that existed 300 years ago when this piece was written.
Wow.
And we remove layers. So I start with about 5 layers, and then as the character progresses, it becomes more and more minimalist.
Wow.
There is one scene where a little bit of a striptease even. Like opera's not all serious. Opera can be funny and
do you think that's the thing that people have got opera wrong? Because I mean, there's got to be people out there who are afraid of opera, who are like, I'd rather go to the cinema and watch the latest, blockbuster or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you think people have got the wrong idea?
A lot of the time, yeah, because the truth is opera is like film in that there are all the genres. I mean, just because you like film doesn't mean you like thrillers and comedy and action and drama and family animations, And the opera is the same. There are dramatic operas, there are comedic operas, there are long operas, very long ones, but there are also short operas.
What would you recommend as a good one for someone who's like, I'm going to give opera a try? Where's a good jump-in point?
Well, not to be biased, but I do think this handle that we're doing this week, the Orlando, is quite a good place to start because the music is beautiful. Like, it's not hard work to listen to this music. The orchestra plays incredibly. Les Talons Lyriques, they're a specialist orchestra. And there's nothing sort of outrageous or challenging in the story or hard to keep up with. You won't feel dumb. I think that's... no one likes to go to something and feel stupid. So... I
got pretty used to it after a while in live. What about if I flip and say, if you want to dive in the deep end, is there a composer or a theme, or not a theme, but like a style of opera that's for the hardcore aficionados that you don't want to accidentally end up in?
Yeah.
Go on then, what's that?
The hardcore thing that people may have heard of is like Wagner, the Ring cycle, which often the opera is like 5 hours long. There's one they're rehearsing.
I've got a story about, I'm not going to tell it now, but I'll tell you after about Wagner, yeah.
They're rehearsing it at the Bastille right now. So if people are interested, that's coming up.
It's a dangerous baptism of fire, I think.
Yeah.
That's what I love.
And the thing about that music, Wagner's music, is it doesn't have like a refrain. Like in pop music, we're used to hearing a chorus that comes back and then a verse and then the chorus that we that we know and love comes back.
Yeah.
But with Wagner operas, it's through composed, which means it never repeats. So you're just like swimming through this pool of always new changing music.
Wow.
But other than that, the main difference, like if people like music theatre or plays, opera shouldn't be that much different, except the main technical difference is that in opera we never use microphones.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas in music theatre, it's a more modern style of music making. You have a microphone. It should be the main difference. But it's still telling a story. It should be just as engaging, just as moving with the characters on stage.
Wow, you can really project your voice, huh?
I try. That's the ideal. If you ever want to insult an opera singer, just say like, I couldn't really hear you over the orchestra. It's like the most painful thing to hear.
Do you find in other aspects of life that you notice you have a strong voice? Do you know what I mean? Like yelling at someone from a bridge or something like that?
Not really, because I don't know. I'm probably a lighter soprano of opera singers. I don't have the biggest voice, actually.
Right.
But everything's relative.
Sure,
right?
Sure. Well, let's finish with a few quick questions about Paris, because you come to Paris quite often. We met at the Australian ambassador's residence. What was that about? What was that event? Do you remember?
Something last year. I think it was just an Australians in Paris event, which I was lucky enough to score an invite to as an honorary resident, because I don't live here, but I am here quite often.
You're on the right mailing list then. Yeah.
But I guess being a singer, because I travel constantly, you sort of become a bit of a cultural ambassador, like for the country, like especially being an Australian performing all around the world. So I come to know the ambassadors often. Sure.
So what about as an Australian in Paris, as an honorary resident in Paris, what are there things here that you just absolutely love? Things that set Paris apart? Especially you've got your finger on the pulse of all these different cities. Are there things that you're just like, I will always come back to Paris for this?
I do really love Paris. There's something about the light in the streets, the little alleyways. Love a good butter croissant.
Oh my gosh,
who doesn't?
me too.
I'm quite a fan of the Peloton Cafe, because I also, to try and have a contrast to all of my cultural activities, is try to do a bit of running and cycling. And so now that the show's opened, I'm hoping to go to one of the communal little running events.
Right.
The Peloton Cafe.
I've been there twice. I was there twice today.
Today? Yeah, wow, you're dedicated.
Well, I start my walking tour there and ended there.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that.
But I have a coffee both times.
Come to think of it, I think I've seen... Do you have books with your wife? Yeah, I've seen them in
They're
that
on
cafe,
display,
actually.
Yeah.
That's right.
Probably the only cafe in the universe that sells our books, so it's kind of cool. Thanks for the plug.
Good branding.
Yeah.
But actually, I got my current cycling jerseys for me and my husband. I got there as well.
Oh, wow.
So took that back to Berlin.
Huge shout out to Le Peloton Cafe.
Hello,
Love
guys.
the Peloton.
Yeah. Paris, I love walking along the river. There are great artists from Australia here as well. Like, if we can also just give a shout out to them. Caroline O'Connor, who's a absolute stalwart figure in Australia of music theatre and cabaret. She's starring in Hello Dolly right now at the Lido Theatre, so I'm going to definitely go and see that before I leave. And the extraordinary soprano Nicole Carr, who has sung all the major roles at the Sydney Opera House and all around Australia. She's beloved. She lives in Paris as well, and she appears here often, so people should keep an eye out for her if they're visiting Paris and want to go and see a show. There's so much to love in Paris. Come on.
And there's a lot of Australians doing cool things here. So we got 3 opera singers here, but there's people on all sorts of creative fields doing cool things. What a time to be Australian.
Filmmakers, painters, dancers. Yeah.
And I've had a lot of them on this show, I must admit. On that note, I will say thank you for being on this show. I'm really excited to see. Do I get to meet you afterwards?
Absolutely.
What happens? Say hello. How do I do it?
I'll meet you with that
secret door.
Your secret door.
Okay, great. And anyone who's in Paris until February 2nd, I believe it is.
Yeah, every second day.
Yep, every second day. Check it out at the Théâtre du Châtelet, a beautiful venue. Try and track down Siobhan at the end to give flowers. Is that what people do?
Sometimes. I got flowers last night because it was the premiere.
Brilliant.
It's not necessary. Flowers are not necessary.
Well, say hello. And Siobhan, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Oliver.
Oh, well,
can I go to Ollie now?
Yeah, now after half an hour, you get an automatic
Thanks,
promotion.
Ollie.
Bertrand from My Private Paris. Let's talk views. I think a lot of people, when they say views, they think you got to get up high and look down over the city.
Well, that usually works.
Yeah, but you've got a whole different approach to this.
I like surprising views.
Yeah.
When Paris is a very dense city.
Yeah.
But from time to time, you get to a cross street, crosswalk, and you turn your head and you see a huge, either a great view from a distance or a building you did not expect to be there, and it's right here.
Is that usually a house median thing? Didn't he make big avenues so you could see monuments?
Yeah, to connect them, yes.
Right. But this is more, we're talking almost accidental view kind of thing?
Yes, more. I mean, the one you're talking about are these very grand views, like on the Champs-Élysées to the Arc de Triomphe, everything like this. They're great, but they're not surprising.
Okay, go on then. What's the surprising one that you got?
I think my favorite one is in the business quarter, on the Grand Boulevard, at the angle with a street called Laffitte. Because you're surrounded by the headquarters of the big banks, and they're beautiful buildings. You can just walk in, and they're beautiful by themselves.
You can walk into those banks?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I have to go there. We should do the best banks of.
I didn't know. I know that you can get in the one. I think it's Société Générale.
Yes.
That's the best. My favorite.
Société Générale, Crédit Lyonnais. You can walk in all of them.
Okay, well let's do that. You can't film though.
Well, with phones now.
We'll do the secret one. We'll stick a GoPro to our...
We'll do Mission Impossible to rob a big bank.
I like the idea. Okay, yep.
But on that one, by the Rue Laffitte corner, you have a great alignment with a small church called Notre-Dame de Lorette. And then when you look up, you see the Sacré-Cœur in the distance.
Yes.
And every time it strikes me. I go there often. I pick a lot of people from a hotel there called the Ambassador, Marriott's Ambassador.
Yep.
And I always make sure to have 10 minutes before so I can surprise myself.
Yeah.
I know what's coming up.
Yeah.
But this view, it's always like a shock.
It makes even a non-religious person have a moment of uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's like two churches in one alignment. It's like the sun coming down behind it all. I know exactly which view you're talking about. Even with the bank or whatever it is the bank or is it one of the newspapers or something on the corner there?
I think this one is a bank.
Yeah.
But you have Le Figaro, Le Monde in that area too.
And you know what I noticed? It reminds me of the moon, because have you ever tried to take a picture of the moon on your iPhone or whatever? It never comes out, right?
No, I haven't.
You've never tried to take a picture of the moon?
No.
Really? Okay, whenever you try to take a picture of the moon because it looks big, you take a photo and you look at it, it doesn't come out right. Same with that view.
I don't think you can photograph it.
I think you need one of those
big lens,
like a sports photographer brings with them to the stadium.
I don't think you should photograph this view, and I think you should just surprise yourself, even if you plan to be surprised, which doesn't make sense. But you will still be surprised.
I love it, and it's just like the banks. You can't bring in the camera, but you can appreciate it. We'll go and do the whole walk, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Perfect.
That sounds like a good idea. For views of Paris, for tours of Paris, inside the city and beyond, My Private Paris, you're listening to Bertrand, and the link is below. Book a tour with them. These guys know exactly what they're doing. See you again soon, Bertrand.
Oui, bien sûr.
Bien dans le ventre et main dans la tête, des mal amassés, du bien en foule.